All right, I got asked today what would be some of the first recovering gear for a beginner. Um, and I kind of thought about it for a second, and I realized that I kind of break it down into two groups. You have things that help you with actual traction, and then you have things that you actually use to pull a vehicle. So I kind of put things together in a little bit of an order of how, you could purchase things. And the very, very, very first thing that I would recommend to anybody getting into off-roading would be to buy an air deflator, a tire deflator. Unfortunately, I don't know where mine is right now. It might be in my pickup truck, or I don't know. I have a couple of them, and they seem to both be missing. So I take them with me everywhere I go. Anytime I plan on going off-road, I have an air deflator. Almost every single time I've ever gotten legitimately stuck, whenever you think about how that happened, it almost always was due to improper tire pressures. So, and also too, when you're starting learning out, understanding tire pressures is probably the very first thing that you should think about when you're going off road. So getting a tire deflator would probably be one of the very first things I would buy, and then accompany that with an air compressor, so that way little portable air compressors, so you can reinflate your tires whenever you get off the trail. But then the next big piece of equipment is these MaxTrax, and actually these aren't the brand MaxTrax. I run X-Bull tracks. I really, really like them. They're literally half the price, and I haven't broken one yet. We have lost one, and that's where we improvise these little strings, because when you're in really, really deep sand, and it's 3 o'clock in the morning and you're trying to get out, believe it or not, you can shoot these things right down into the bedrock and you'll never find them again. So having some kind of string on there to retrieve them is really good. But you can get a set of boards for under $100. So between deflating your tires and having some type of MaxTrax, those are really going to go a long way into getting yourself out. The cool thing about a MaxTrax is in soft sand or snow, they also can be used as a shovel. Although having a shovel is better than having something that pretends to be a shovel. But yeah, those are right there along the beginning. And arguably, maybe even before some people would do that, other people would look at, we were talking about recovery points. The thing that you got to realize about recovery points is you want things that are completely mounted to the frame. You never want to pull on somebody from up here, any of that kind of stuff. This whole thing will turn into a lever and you'll rip it right off. Even hooking up to these here in this bar, even though this front bumper is mounted on 4 points on each side, you would still want to distribute the load between them if you really had to pull from the front. Ideally, most vehicles have a 2-inch receiver on the back, and that is probably one of the best places to pull a vehicle. This bumper is a little different. It has a 2-inch receiver, but it's built into the bumper. So if it was me, I again would be pulling from both those anchors, distribute the load, and go that way. But if you just have a 2-inch receiver, the thing that you need to buy is this guy right here. This is a 2-inch receiver shackle adapter. It goes in there like that. This one's kind of a cheapie. I recommend buying one that has a hole in this way, so that way you can actually flip it this way. That way you can have your shackle in different locations. And believe it or not, if you don't have one of these, I highly recommend carrying a couple of extra these. This is the pin for that guy, because in a pinch, you can set that in there, put the strap around that guy, and pull from there, and they work really, really well. I've done that numerous times. What you never, ever, 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 ever want to do is pull from the ball of death. I know that people that have gone off-roading before have heard this 1,000 times, but we'll say it 1,000 more. Never, ever put a strap on a ball. I know in Europe, I don't know what they look like in Australia, but I know in Europe they look a little bit different like that. They look a little bit more like a penis. But these things are so incredibly deadly. And if you don't believe me, just go to YouTube. There are so many videos of these things being pulled and its ball being completely sheared off. And then this turns into a cannonball. And it literally goes in the direction of the vehicle that's pulling it or being pulled. It is so incredibly dangerous. I can't tell you how many times someone's tried to help me get unstuck, and they've gone and taken my rope, and they've gone up there like this, and they're like, all right, we're ready. And even though it's not my vehicle, I tell them no. We take this thing out, we use that pin, we use other device, but never ever pull from the ball. Always just get one of these, right? Or use the pin. The next thing would be kinetic ropes. And I'm a huge fan of kinetic ropes. If you've ever pulled in the past, like when I was growing up, we used really heavy duty straps. They had hardly any give in them. And sometimes we even used chain. And in those days, if people yanked really hard, you could bend people's frames, you could do damage to people's vehicles. So what we usually would do is we would hook up to a vehicle with our chain or whatever, and we'd get it real taut. And then we would use the weight of the tow vehicle plus some, power acceleration to get the vehicle unstuck. Nowadays, we can use these kinetic ropes, which actually have anywhere from 30 to 50% of stretch in them, and reasonably get some momentum, 15 miles an hour, 20 miles an hour, and this thing will stretch and it will apply that force of that moving vehicle more gently to the stuck vehicle, and you will be able to pull that vehicle out. These things are absolutely awesome. I carry this everywhere I go when I go off-roading. What I never do though is stick it on here. You never do that. You get yourself a shackle. Of course, none of my shackles are set up because I'm shooting this one-handed. You get yourself a shackle. You loop the shackle through there like that. You put the shackle into the 2-inch receiver and you put the pin in it and you pin it off, and you do that to both vehicles. If you're not able to, if you only have one of those, you take one of these pins right here, you'll loop it through there like that, and you put it through the holes on the 2-inch receiver. So much safer than using a ball. So yeah, so there's your next piece of gear. And then when it comes to shackles, there's two different types. You have the soft shackles here, and then you have the hard shackles here. People will tell you which one's better than, which ones you need to have. And the reality is you really need both. You can't have enough shackles. These are great because in case of a disaster, so that the rope breaks, you're taking metal out of your line, so that won't come flying back. These weigh so much less than one of these. So what I tell everybody is, you want to carry a couple of metal ones and you want to carry a bunch of these. These though, in some ways, these can break. If you put this guy around here and you start pulling on it real hard, that's a real sharp corner that could cut that. You wouldn't want to use a soft shackle right there. On a more rounded corner, that one's pretty sharp too. Good way of doing them though is, you need to join two ropes together. Soft shackles are really great, for that, putting those two ropes together. And then from there, you're gonna move up to the full-blown, sorry about that. Yeah, so from there, you're gonna move up to the full-blown winch. And I'll be honest with you, you know, a winch, $500, $700, depending on which winch you get. You don't use them a whole lot, but it's one of those things where when you do use it, most likely none of this other stuff will work. And the winch will get you out. But then when you get into the winch, you know, there's a whole bunch of other gear that you also have to, you know, start thinking about. You got your shackles, or sorry, your snatch blocks. I got a snatch ring there. Things start to get more complicated. And honestly, they also get more dangerous. So starting off with your traction devices, not a whole lot can go wrong with a board and deflating your tires. You're not going to hurt anybody that way. You start moving up to pulling people out, and the risk becomes a little bit more. We talked about, you know, not pulling with a hitch ball. You start moving into a winch, you start talking about really heavy loads, things become a little bit more dangerous. But the idea, kind of like thinking about this, is how to step a beginner up to going, you know, full board. And so that's kind of where I would start. Think about your traction. Think about lowering the air pressure in your tires, shovels to dig you out, traction boards, pulling you out, where to pull on your vehicle. It's kind of like a learning process. And then someday, you know, you'll move all the way up and you'll figure out how to get this whole heavy trailer out of the sand dunes by using a card table. This is no lie. We were off-roading one night. We made it to the sand dunes at like 3 o'clock in the morning. We got stuck trying to get to our campsite. We literally lost one of our traction boards, but we could only go as far as our traction boards, and then we get stuck again. So we busted out a giant plastic table and were able to get ourselves out. Ended up busting the table. But hey, we learned a lot that day and lived to tell about it. So yeah, that's just kind of my intro into gear that I would buy. You need to also start thinking about servicing your gear. Some of these soft straps are consumables. They're reaching the end of their life, and I will be replacing them shortly. Shackles last a little bit longer, and there's also videos about how to maintain this gear and stuff online. But that's kind of a quick video of where I would begin. Let me know your thoughts.